Hello everyone, Santir here for the Protection Prayers subpart of the Monk part of the Guild Wars 1 skill review project that I am doing. So we're going to jump right in, starting with Aegis. So Aegis is 10 energy, 2 second cast time, 30 second recharge. It is an enchantment spell, and for 10 seconds, all party members within earshot have a 50% chance to block attacks. So the area of this is earshot range. I may have not originally been just earshot, but so while you have this enchantment on you, you have a 50% chance to block attacks, and it affects everyone. This is actually a pretty strong effect because it will mitigate quite a lot of damage. I definitely do not use this skill enough. The main issues, of course, being 10 energy and a 30 second recharge. Both those are kind of high, obviously, so it's 2 second cast time. So this has an appropriate type line for counteracting it. Fun fact, the PvP version of this skill does something completely different because they felt that Aegis, as it is implemented, proved to be a bit too strong. Mirror of Disenchantment is a really strong counter to it. But anyway, as for this skill, I'm going to give it a 4. I do think it is a fairly strong skill and just one that I underutilize. And I should probably use it more often than I do, because this effect is really good at alleviating pressure that's happening to your entire team. So I'm quite fond of that aspect of it. Let's move on to Air of Enchantment. So if you remember in the Mesmer line, we had Air of Disenchantment, and that's kind of a play on this skill. Air of Enchantment is 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 8 second recharge. Elite enchantment spell for 9 seconds. Enchantments cast on target other ally cost 5 less energy with a minimum of 1. So this is a type of energy management. It was quite popular in combination with some Smiting Prayer stuff, where it would be like a combination of this, Zealot's Fire, and other things. And that was a powerful, like reversal of damage, reversal of fortune, and stuff like that. Quick recharging enchantments. That was a popular PvP sort of meta for at least a little while, where that was really powerful. That sort of build might be able to work. I like the icon, actually. The icon is like really nice and tropical looking, but a lot of monk icons actually I'm quite fond of. Not all of them, but quite a few. But anyway, Air of Enchantment's not an elite that I usually use. You do need to have enough enchantments going on. Now, keep in mind that this affects all enchantments cast on that target other ally, not just ones that you are casting. So this can kind of serve as energy management for multiple monks if they're throwing enchantments on one person, but honestly, to really get strong benefit out of this, you have to be throwing on a lot of enchantments. From a design standpoint, I just don't think this is a good design. The idea is interesting in terms of like, oh, we're going to make it really easy to enchant this person. That's an interesting variant on energy management. The problem is I don't think it's balanceable. There's no reason typically to spam a bunch of enchantments on one ally, and because that's how this works, it kind of doesn't have a good place. Like, you're either not getting enough benefit out of it because you're like having to cast this and then at least one other enchantment on them, right? So to really be getting benefit out of this, you need to be casting at probably 2 other enchantments or something on that ally within the 9-second window. You can extend it to probably 10 or 11 seconds, 12 seconds, but it's still a somewhat short window to be like, I need to throw a bunch of enchantments on this person. You are taking additional time. Like if it's an emergency situation, having a lead up to putting enchantments on them isn't great either. So I don't think, in other words, kind of what I'm coming at here is, if you're trying to balance a skill like this, I think you're going to really struggle to do so successfully, because the only reason to really place this is if you really want to spam them with enchantments, and the only reason to do that is if you're doing something abusive with it. So the only time that this effect that I can think of, the way that is presented on this skill, would be useful is in abusive situations, and otherwise it's not going to be good enough to bring. It is, again, taking up your elite slot. That's a huge cost. So I just don't really like the design of the skill, just because I feel like it's one of those skills that kind of falls on this mountaintop, where either it's going to roll down the side of useless or roll down the side of abusive and overpowered, and there's no middle ground. It has to pick one of those 2 directions to fall. So I'm going to give it a 2 because it is a powerful sort of build around me with Zealot's Fire. provided they work together. I believe they still do, in PvE at least. But from a design standpoint, I don't like where the design of this skill is. Okay, that brings us to one of the few monk hexes, Amity. So Amity is 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 45 second recharge, elite and hex spell. For 18 seconds, adjacent foes cannot attack. So this is adjacent to you when you cast it. For each foe, Amity ends if that foe takes damage. So this is kind of an elite variant on Pacifism. Pacifism here is an enchantment that makes a foe unable to attack, and it ends when they take damage. So it basically kind of like applies Pacifism to all enemies adjacent to you. This is awkward to use. The effect is kind of powerful, sort of, but the problem is it's going to end really easily, because if they take damage... So here's the thing. If you're in PvE, you're going to be applying a lot of area of effect damage because you want to kill as many enemies as quickly as you can. This doesn't work well with that. It probably works pretty well if you're piling on health degen hexes like Suffering and Lingering Curse and things like that. But I'm not sure. And if you're applying conditions through, like health degeneration conditions through means that don't inflict damage, so like Rotting Flesh, for example. I'm saying it works nicely with Necromancers, I guess. But as it is, the skill, like, it's going to have a really hard time staying on enemies because they're so likely that they're going to be dealt damage, incidental damage by heroes and stuff like that. It also is quite long-lasting on the, like, 18-second end. Yeah, it's going to end really quickly, but it's kind of... The recharge is balanced around the 18-second duration. And you have to be point-blank with enemies. I actually like Pacifism mildly better just because that can be cast into range, whereas this you have to get up in your enemy's face, which is not really a spot you want to be in. I can see this being amusing in random arenas, which is a PvP area where you just, like, you enter and join a random team. I can see it being amusing in that, unlike some sort of strange Necromancer health degen build, but even that's dubious. I'd rather bring Pacifism. So I don't really feel like this skill has a place anywhere. I'm going to give it a 1. I don't want it. I don't want to use it. I don't want to waste my elite slot on it. Nice swirling things there. Like, it's the sort of effect... Basically, this is the sort of effect where if it works too, I don't really like that. I much prefer Punisher effects like Empathy, for example, just for the simple reason that there's counterplay there, right? I shouldn't attack you because I'll take damage and do very minimal damage to you if I have Empathy on me. But if I have Amity or Pacifism, I just can't attack you, and that's less interesting. It kind of takes them out of the fight, sort of, but it's a little frustrating to be hexed by it as well. But I just don't think it plays super well. So it's an obvious sort of effect to have of like, oh, and I prevent them from attacking. But the caveats required on it of like ending when they take damage and things like that is just very uninteresting. So like, I would kind of prefer this if this effect didn't have the end if they take damage clause, but lasted maybe like 5 seconds and had like a 10, 12 second recharge, something like that. Sort of a slap it for a get off of me type button. And even then, I wouldn't want to use it just because, like, yes, it can be powerful damage mitigation, but because it requires, like, so if this was like, foes adjacent to target ally cannot attack, right? If it was that, so like, say 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 12 second recharge, elite hex spell for 5, maybe 6 seconds, foes adjacent to target ally cannot attack. If that was what it said, full stop, then it would be, okay, this is really cool, this is really interesting. This is a way of saying, hey, that ally's under a lot of pressure. I'm going to pull this button that basically says, hey, nobody can attack, like, the melee attackers on them are no longer going to be able to do so. That would be really interesting. As written, I don't have any use for it. So let's move on to Aura of Faith, which I'm pretty sure used to have a different effect, and then they changed it to this one. So Aura of Faith is 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 8 second recharge, elite enchantment spell. For 3 seconds, target ally gains 90% more health when healed and takes 41% less damage. So this is a really nice oh crap button type of skill. it's great to be able to, like, hey, that ally is dying. I'm going to throw Aura of Faith on them. And now when they get healed, it's going to be a lot more. And I'm going to dramatically decrease the damage they're taking. Like, the thing, too, is that this will affect, like, all forms of damage, right? So armor ignoring, stuff like that. I believe Lifesteal can get around it. And the reason why I say that is because it doesn't specifically call out Lifesteal. We will see skills that specifically call out Lifesteal later on. But this is one of those, like, it's fine for me. It's a 3. I'm okay with using it. The main issue is I prefer to spend my elite slot, especially on heroes, on some of the stronger push-up health bar type skills. Healing Burst it's seriously basically the only elite I run on my monk healing heroes. And so while Aura of Faith I think is a pretty reasonable skill, the fact of the matter is I want the HP bar pushing skills more because those are proportionally very strong for their energy cost. And so that it matters enough to me that I prefer that sort of thing. But Aura of Faith is certainly a fine skill. Which brings us to another aura, this time Aura of Stability. So Aura of Stability is 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 12-second recharge. It is an enchantment spell. For 7 seconds, target other ally cannot be knocked down. The other is kind of obnoxious. I understand why it's there from more of a PvP standpoint. This effect's not bad, but the fact is it's single target, and so I'm very unexcited by it. I would rather bring... There's a PvE... Like, if I'm bringing a skill to try to stop my allies from being knocked down, I would rather bring Don't Trip, which is a PvE-only skill that makes all of my party members in earshot unable to be knocked down. It doesn't have as good of uptime and stuff like that, but it affects everyone. I don't have to worry about who I'm prioritizing. I'm going to give this a 2. It is a strong countermeasure to knock down if you want to protect somebody from it, and I certainly like it for that more than I like, what was that other one? Supportive Spirit, because I'd rather stop the knockdown than just be like, I don't know, get healed while being knocked down. That said, so there's another skill that Paragons have called Brace Yourself, which I believe is something... Well, I shouldn't just... I doubt this character has it, but it doesn't hurt to check, does it? So... Oh, yeah. Oh, I do have Brace Yourself. Huh, fancy that. So I'm not going to look at the high levels of it, but it's a shout that makes it the next time... And you can see here, it's 5 energy. Shout doesn't have a cast time. 4-second recharge. The next time target other ally would be knocked down. All nearby foes take some damage instead. So, like, this here has a benefit on that, but this only triggers on the next time the knockdown would occur, versus Aura of Stability, which just makes them unable to be knocked down. The thing is, I would rather take Brace Yourself. No cast time, shorter recharge, still target other ally, has a benefit when it prevents knockdown. Just because Aura of Stability... it prevents all knockdowns that they would receive, but usually enemies are not going to be hit with multiple knockdowns at once, sort of thing, or like in chains. I can see trying to do some sort of weird supporty like build where you're keeping Aura of Stability and maybe you're using the Blessed Aura or whatever it was in Divine Favor that extends the duration of monk enchantments and stuff to try to get a permanent uptime on Aura of Stability on a like Drunken Blow type warrior or something. But that to me is very questionable. So it's fine to have this effect exist. I just don't have a reason to want to bring it in PvE most of the time. Especially because it doesn't affect everyone, stuff like that. Okay, Convert Hexes. A popular skill with the White Mantle, if I remember correctly. But it's 15 energy, 1-second cast time, 12-second recharge, which is pretty quick. Very expensive, though. Spell. Remove all hexes from target other ally. So you cannot target yourself with this. For 18 seconds, that ally gains plus 10 armor for each Necromancer hex that was removed. So you have this kind of weird interplay between Necromancers and Monks, where Monks have things that are like anti-Necromancer, basically in the form of this skill, And necromancers have a few skills that are like, oh, but if you remove a monk enchantment, so they kind of like have this weird interplay where it's like, oh, you removed a necromancer hex. Oh, I'm gonna make you buffed. And necromancers of, oh, I know, I removed a monk enchantment, it burns. It's just kind of this weird thing on just a couple of skills. It feels like a theme that was kind of there but not really explored. I don't mind that sort of thing. It just feels really strange long term just because none of the professions otherwise have any sort of inbuilt conflict, and monks and necromancers are perfectly happy working together, generally speaking, so I'm not quite sure. It feels like a vestige of some flavor thing that used to be that isn't really a thing anymore. In terms of the skill itself, it does remove all hexes from target other ally, but it also does so at 15 energy, and bluntly, the plus 10 armor effect, it's not an enchantment, it's just like, it's a skill effect, it's a spell effect that just sticks on them. It's not going to come up that often, I don't think, so I would prefer to do something with like deny hexes, which is the divine favor skill that removes a hex plus 1 additional for each recharging divine favor skill. You can kind of get 2 or 3 with that, and that's usually going to be enough. Removing all hexes sounds really strong, but keep in mind it's a very rare situation that somebody has more than 2-3 hexes on them. That's like a heavy amount of hexes, so this is realistically not getting you that much bang for your buck. I would like this okay at 10 energy, but the thing is deny hexes exists, and yes, it requires you to do some build around stuff, but honestly, convert hexes is just so expensive. I am going to give it a 2. It does do stuff, and it does stuff pretty well. It's just very overpriced for that effect, in terms of like, I don't know when I'm going to go into an area that's so heavy on hexes that I'm like, okay, this person's going to have like, 6 or 7 hexes on them. I just want to clear them all away with convert hexes. That just doesn't really happen. And frankly, if I'm going to an area that heavy on hexes that I really need to deal with it, I might just want this elite skill here, divert hexes, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But first, we have to talk about dismiss condition. So dismiss condition is 5 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 3-second recharge, spell, remove 1 condition from target ally. If that ally is under the effects of an enchantment, that ally is healed for 63 health. Now, it's really important to understand how this works. These are 2 separate clauses, right? Bullet point 1 removes a condition from an ally, right? From your targeted ally. Line 2, if target ally is under the effects of enchantment, that ally is healed for 63 health. The heal is not conditional or based on whether or not a condition was removed, which will become relevant in a moment when we get to some later condition removal stuff. I think this skill is honestly a little too good from the stand. So it's important to have some context. So we have Mend Ailment here, which removes a condition from a target ally and then heals them for each remaining condition. This can target yourself. It has a 5-second recharge. Mend Condition removes a condition from an other ally, so you cannot target yourself with it. And if it removes a condition, that ally is healed for 57 health. And it has a 2-second recharge. So Mend Ailment's downside is, generally, it's not going to be as effective at healing. If they only have 1 condition on them, it's not going to heal them. If they have a bunch, obviously it's going to heal more. But you can target yourself with it. Whereas Mend Condition cannot target yourself, but has a shorter recharge and a more reliable heal. These were the skills that were available to us in Prophecies for removing conditions as kind of like non-elite versions. There's also Restore Condition, but we'll get to that much later. As an elite, it's not as relevant to this discussion. So Mending Touch was added at some point in time, which removes 2 conditions and heals for each one removed, but has the longest recharge of these by far at 6 seconds, and is touch range. So, like, that's a huge downside. And actually, if I sort by campaign, we can get a little bit of data. So you can see right here, Mend Ailment is probably being thrown in core. It was released in Prophecies, and because I believe all core skills were released in Prophecies. And then this is, Mend Condition right here is under Prophecies. Then when was Dismiss Condition introduced? I feel like Mend Condition was, Oh, Mend Condition is not here. Neither is Dismiss. So factions did not release Dismiss Condition. Nightfall released Dismiss Condition. Okay, was Mend? Yeah, Mending Touch was also there. Anyway, it's not as relevant to this discussion. Going back to the attribute sort, because that's how we're discussing these. The relevant detail here is that Dismiss Condition targets yourself, right? It's any ally. Has a 3-second recharge, which is notably faster than Mend Ailment, and only a little bit slower than Mend Condition, and it's certainly not a huge downside. The conditional heal is on them being enchanted, so you can actually use this as a healing spell. If they have an enchantment on them, this is Orison of Healing, right? 63 health, and just simply for 5 energy, a 3-second recharge, cast faster than Orison. They have to be enchanted, of course, but it's basically like an Orison of Healing that also removes a condition if they're enchanted. And you can target yourself with it. I feel like this skill is a little bit too versatile, and the conditional clause on it is preferential to the healing clause, I should be clear. The condition for the healing is preferential over Mend Ailment and Mend Condition, and the fact you can target yourself is a big deal. So I feel like this skill just is a little too good, if that makes sense. I am going to give it a 4, because I don't always bring it. I like it reasonably well, but Mend Body and Soul tends to be my preferred condition removal. But I just kind of want to explain from like a design standpoint where I'm not quite happy with what this one is trying to do, because I feel that it just kind of eclipses those two skills where there's a real choice between whether or not you wanted Mend Ailment or Mend Condition, predominantly on whether or not you wanted to be able to target yourself and things like that. That Dismiss Condition just kind of like sidesteps into first place, and it's just that bothers me a little bit. Because again, like these skills you're predominantly bringing for like because of the condition removal, but this one you can bring for the healing as well as the condition removal in a way that the other two don't, and that kind of invalidates them. And I would prefer skills to not just like eclipse other skills that bluntly, if that makes sense. Divert Hexes. So this was added to combat Hexway, I believe. It's 10 energy, 1 second cast time, 5-second recharge, elite spell, remove up to 3 hexes from target ally. For each hex removed in this way, that ally loses 1 condition and gains 63 health. This is a 2. It's designed specifically to combat heavy pressure type situations where a bunch of hexes are being thrown on allies and then they're getting conditions and stuff too. Removes up to those 3 hexes, can dig right through a bunch of hexes. The additional condition removal is kind of a nice bonus. It's really a very strong hex removal spell. The thing is, this is a very targeted sort of skill, and most of the time, I don't want to spend my elite slot on a very strong hex removal skill because I'm just not getting plastered with enough hexes to be worth it. This skill is made for PvP. It is not made for PvE. If it was to be useful in PvE, you need to have zones where you're just getting swamped by like Suffering and Lingering Curse and things like that, where it's worth it to bring a skill to clean up hexes. And that just doesn't happen a ton. There's some areas where it might be reasonable, but often they're going to be more like sections of maps rather than entire maps. So, yeah, I don't typically use it. Draw Conditions. This is 5 energy, quarter-second cast time, 4-second recharge. Spell. All negative conditions are transferred from target other ally to yourself. For each condition acquired, you gain 22 health. So I talked about this some with Necromancer, Foul Feast being a Necromancer copy of this with upside. From a design standpoint, I like the way that this interplays with Necromancer skills, and technically it can work with a Dervish skill that transfers conditions from yourself. Grunth's Fingers, I believe. That's a less... I prefer like a Plague Sending type route for the synergy here. I'm going to give it a 2. I think it has some cool synergies, but I'm not going to just bring this. If you are going into an area laden with conditions, this is a way of being able to transfer a bunch of them. But honestly, it's depending upon what's going on, there are probably other options for dealing with that are preferable. quite frankly, Mend Body and Soul is just really, really, really good, and there's almost no reason to not bring a Signet of Spirits ritualist that is also using Mend Body and Soul. So this sort of thing doesn't have a ton of place. I like the position it has with that sort of Necromancer thing. I could see an argument for running both Draw Conditions and Foul Feast, but Foul Feast is certainly the superior choice. But I did a whole rant on Foul Feast in the Necromancer videos, so I'm not going to relitigate it here. Extinguish. 15 energy, which is quite a lot. 1 second cast time, 12-second recharge. Spell. Remove 1 condition from each party member. Party members relieved of burning are healed for 82 health. So, this is a 2. I'm generally not going to bring this, but there are some circumstances where it is perfectly reasonable to bring. The primary one, honestly, is A Time for Heroes, if I'm remembering the name of it correctly, which is the final mission in Eye of the North when you are fighting the Great Destroyer, and you're constantly on fire in lava and stuff like that. Then Extinguish can be really nice because it temporarily relieves the pressure and does a really big party heal. Otherwise, I'm not going to generally bring this. 15 energy is just a lot. It will remove a condition from each party member, which does mean that it's really good at, like, oh, if conditions have gone wide on you, this will clean it up. It's a great way of taking care of disease from your party, for example. If everybody's, like, getting disease, and it can be like, I'm going to extinguish that and just clear it all up. But this is not a skill I just bring for casual condition removal just because it's so expensive. You don't want to use this to remove a condition from, like, 1 or 2 people. You need to be getting at least 3, 4 people to really make the energy cost worth it. And the recharge is actually kind of long for condition removal. A lot of it is, 5 seconds or less. You saw dismiss condition, mend condition, 2, 3 seconds. So it's viable for some circumstances, but it's I'm not going to bring this most of the time because it's too expensive and does too little to be worth the slot. But if you're going into an area where you're going to be getting a lot of conditions on you, like across your party, but they're not going very deep, or especially if you're going into an area where there's going to be a lot of burning, maybe some of the Ring of Fire stuff where you're going to be fighting in lava, it could be okay there. Things like that, it can be fine, but I would not tend to trust this to heroes. So, Guardian. I don't know, I'm scrolling down there. Guardian is 5 energy, 1 second cast time, 4 second recharge. Enchantment spell. For 6 seconds, target ally has a 50% chance to block attacks. So this is an awful lot like an individual Aegis. It's also really, really good. This will do a lot of damage mitigation. You just place it on somebody and suddenly half of the damage that they'd be receiving is cut out, is roughly how it works. This is basically a 5 from me. That was awkwardly pronounced, but yeah, I bring Guardian on my monks all the time because it is really good damage mitigation, and kind of like the classic example of it. So I'm quite fond of this skill. You'll see it floating around a lot. Kind of an interesting icon. So yeah, I am massively fond of this skill. I think this is a really good design too. It's single target, so you have to be paying attention to who you're putting it on. But it does a really good job of mitigating damage without stopping it entirely, and it plays specifically against attack damage, not spell damage or skill damage necessarily, unless it's an attack skill. So it has this nice spot where it plays in that I quite like. It's got that shorter duration, short recharge sort of thing, so you're having to figure out where does this go and that sort of thing. So I quite like the design of this skill in terms of how it plays as well. Life Attunement. Popular with the Dolyak riders in the Shiver Peaks. Life Attunement is 1 pip of energy regeneration to maintain, 10 energy, 2 second cast time, no recharge. Is an enchantment spell. While you maintain this enchantment, target ally deals 30% less damage with attacks, but gains 43% more health when healed. Okay, so I don't know why you would use this. It has a big upfront cost of 10 energy, and then you have to maintain it. And while you're maintaining it, your ally does less damage, but you can heal them better. Technically, I guess this could be okay to place on some sort of caster, like an elementalist or something, so that way you can heal them better, because it's not going to affect their spell damage, just because it specifically says attacks. I don't like this, though. So, like, allowing you to heal them better is great and all, or allowing them to be healed better, it doesn't require you to be the one healing them. Like, that's great and all. Again, I like monk icons. It's kind of a neat one. But the costs of using this are so high that, like, I don't really care for this effect. It's just too expensive. Has too much downside, and the upside of healing them for more is just not quite worth it. If this was something where, like, it was 5 energy, quarter-second cast time, I could see potentially using it, because then you could throw it on somebody and then spam them with heals and then drop it. But as it is, it's way too clunky to use. So I'm going to give this a 1. I never want to use this, just because of how expensive it is to make use of and how clunky and awkward it is. Life Barrier. So Life Barrier goes in discussion with Life Bond, because they tended to go on the same builds together. I'll talk about that build a little bit more with Life Bond. Life Barrier is 1 pip of energy to maintain, 15 energy to cast, 2 seconds to cast, and 5-second recharge. It is an elite enchantment spell. While you maintain this enchantment, damage dealt to target other ally is reduced by 44%. If your health is below 50%, when that ally takes damage, Life Barrier ends. So you need to keep yourself healthy, is kind of the important thing here. So Life Barrier is part of the Bonder build, which works with Life Bond, and the Blessed Signet from Divine Favor that would give you a bunch of energy while you're maintaining enchantments. It's a very dubious build. So to me, this is not a skill you just casually bring. It's clunky, it's expensive. Again, has a fine icon, I guess. If you're trying to do something with this, you need to be very good with your positioning. So that way you can kind of be out of the area of the fight, because what you're doing is you're not actively healing or anything. You're not being active. You're sitting back passively providing a support for your team. I'm going to give this a 2, and I'll talk about a little bit more why with Life Bond, just because Life Bond is more of the center of the build. It's kind of what it's named about, and I want the full context here. So Life Bond is 1 pip to maintain, 10 energy to cast, and a 2-second cast time. It is an enchantment spell, and while you maintain this enchantment, whenever target other ally takes damage from an attack, half of that damage is redirected to you, but the damage you receive this way is reduced by 25. So you would basically stack Life Barrier and Life Bond on an ally, or on as much of your party as you could, or your front line and stuff like that. They'd become super durable, super tanky, really, really hard to deal damage to them. The thing is, and I've said this before with other skills, this game doesn't have aggro control or aggro management like other games do. There's no taunt effect or anything like that. So while enemies will tend to target the first enemies that come their way, and so you can apply these and kind of hang back, you do need to be going into an area that doesn't have enchantment removal. These will allow you to be able to make somebody really durable. I'm not going to just casually slot them onto a bar. It's just too awkward, too clunky, and so it's not worth doing. They create a different playstyle, and I appreciate that. I'm going to give this one a 2 as well, by the way. I don't think I would bring this out of a specific build. That build, again, can be really good at mitigating damage. It is very awkward to move with because you are constantly having to spam Blessed Signet to avoid running out of energy, just because you're probably putting this on enough of your party that your energy is going to be degenerating very quickly. Again, these are not emergency skills. These are ones that you pre-apply and then you maintain through use of Blessed Signet and stuff like that. So while that can be quite effective at reducing damage, if that enemy is getting hit, you do have to, you kind of almost need 2 bonder barriers if you're going to be double using them. I think Life Bond is the better of the two. So this reduces the damage by 44%. This reduces the damage they take by half minus the 25. And I think that's a more powerful effect. More often, that's going to reduce more damage than I think Life Barrier will. They do stack really nicely. So certainly, so the Dredge in the Echovold Forest use Life Bond, and you do want to figure out who their monk is and take them down. I'm pretty sure they do, because it does make them a lot more durable. So it creates some interesting play from that standpoint, and from the enemy using it, where you need to especially prioritize their monk, although it's usually a good idea anyway. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the playstyle, and I don't tend to use these like ever. They're not emergency skills, etc. But like I said, they do create that different playstyle, and I do appreciate that different playstyle exists. So, fun fact, at one point in time, there was a way to manage aggro. Specifically, holding a bundle item would cause enemies to aggro on you. This was used in Sorrow's Furnace for farming. It's called the gear trick there, because you have these large gears that you carry around, and while you're carrying them, enemies would focus entirely on you, and that was aggro control. And in that case, Life Bond and Life Barrier were fantastic, because you just put them on that one person, and then they would basically be super durable, and you could throw some other stuff on too to protect them, and they just become like invulnerable, and all the enemies focus their efforts there, and you're like, I'm chilling fine, because all the enemies are attacking one thing. So that was a thing that existed for a while. They eventually got rid of that working, but yeah. Anyway, guess those are some of my thoughts on those skills. Let's move on to Life Sheath. So Life Sheath is actually kind of an elite version of Reversal of Fortune, a skill we're going to talk about probably a good bit later. There's a lot to say on it. But anyway, it's 5 energy, quarter-second cast time, 2-second recharge. It is an elite enchantment spell. Remove 2 conditions from target ally, and then separately, for 8 seconds the next time that ally would take damage or lifesteal, that ally gains that amount of health instead. Maximum of 84. So, to me, this skill is more of an enchantment, or more of a condition removal spell. It's a really kind of awkward ordering, because it's so this effect of like the next time they take that damage, they gain health instead. That's all that Reversal of Fortune does, right? It's 5 energy. Yeah, I need to talk about Reversal of Fortune. So we're going to be breaking up the order a little bit here. It's just really important to talk about Reversal of Fortune, because I do have a lot to say about it. And Life Sheath is going to try to steal its thunder. So we're just going to jump to Reversal of Fortune, do that one, come back to Life Sheath, and kind of finish that one. So Reversal of Fortune is 5 energy, quarter-second cast time, 2-second recharge. It's an enchantment spell. For 8 seconds, the next time target ally would take damage or lifesteal, that ally gains that amount of health instead. Maximum of 67. So this skill had the lifesteal stapled onto it later to try to counter some of the blood spike stuff in PvP. I don't like that, just because I want I want the lifesteal to go through these things, because I think that's more interesting separation of stuff. But I digress. This skill apparently was described at one point in time as like the cornerstone around which things were balanced. It's been considered a very strong skill, a very popular skill. You can see its nice bubble there. Honestly, I think this skill is, to some extent, been overrated. I don't think it's a bad skill, but I think it's really important to put it in context. This, basically, whenever you take a hit, think of this as healing twice that amount. The first time, so like say I would be dealt 12 damage. Instead of being dealt 12 damage, I'm healed for 12 health. That negates that 12 damage and then heals me that 12 on top, which is a total of 24 health that I did not lose, right? So ordinarily I'd be down 12 health, now I'm up. That's a differential of 24, is another way to kind of express that. So you can kind of think that any of the blows that this hits, it kind of heals for twice that amount. So if you get hit for 30 health, for 30 damage, instead you're healed for 30 instead of taking 30. That's kind of like if you had taken the 30 and then been healed for 60, you'd be at the same spot. I'm just trying to give the mental framework for understanding how this skill's working, what it's doing. So here's the thing. This skill sounds really good because you can kind of see the potential here. right? Oh, instead of taking damage, they get healed. That sounds really good, but you have to actually think about what sort of damage values are you usually seeing. This skill becomes good when it's hitting for, around 40, 50, that it's converting into healing, where it's basically like healing for like 80 to 80 plus health, effectively, where it's effective net gain is that, because again, converting the damage into a positive. A lot of PvE is honestly going to be doing less than that. So we need to look at this honestly and compare it to Orison of Healing, because Orison of Healing is kind of its counterpart. So Orison of Healing at the same spec, and I'm going to need to take out of this okay, that's more than I needed, but whatever. So if I go ahead and grab Orison of Healing, which if you remember, was generally considered a very weak skill. So if we look at these guys side by side, Orison of Healing heals for 60 health. This prevents up to 67 damage and converts that to healing. But otherwise, their stats are very similar. 5 energy, this is 1 second cast time instead of quarter second, but 2 second recharge. If you would not bring Orison of Healing on your bar, you really need to consider when you'd bring Reversal of Fortune. I can see bringing this in hard mode or in higher level areas where enemies are going to be consistently dealing 30 plus damage. But if they're dealing 30 damage, that's just an Orison of Healing. If you think Orison of Healing is too weak, then if they're dealing 30 or less damage, Reversal of Fortune also has to be super weak. That's just how it works, right? The time when Reversal of Fortune is at its best is when it's very easy basically to get into best case scenario syndrome. And if you look at what a lot of PvE is, particularly normal mode, through a lot of the standard areas, and even in some of the higher areas, you're going to be getting hit for a lot of things in the teens to 20s, maybe into the 30s. But stuff that's in the teens and 20s or lower, Reversal of Fortune is giving you absolutely awful return on investment. The amount of energy you're putting into it and then getting back out is just, the amount of healing you're getting back out is just very, very poor. Additionally, if it's getting double cast, one of those is completely wasted. So I think Reversal of Fortune is an okay skill, but honestly, I think it's been highly overrated. It should not be stapled to your bar unless you're going into hard mode. Then maybe it belongs there. It's so often, I think its average case is probably effectively like healing for 48 maybe, where that's like a 24 damage hit, something like that. Just because a lot of the time that's just what's going to happen. It's going to absorb a 1 blow, or it's going to absorb maybe a normal weapon hit. And a lot of the time, that's going to have a hard time being any at all superior to Orison of Healing. So again, if Orison of Healing seems really weak, well, Reversal of Fortune is often going to be worse Orison of Healing. That's something that's really important to keep in mind. That's something that's really important to understand with a skill like this, where yes, it can be really solid, where it's healing for 80, 50, 120 HP net effectively, right? In those cases, it's stellar. It's really, really good. But a lot of the time, and I think in the average case, it's healing for like roughly 20 to 60. And in that range, it's just not impressive enough, and it's kind of a waste of energy. Sorry about the hiccup there. My connection dropped for some random reason. Anyway, as I was saying, Reversal of Fortune, when you're bringing it, I think you really need to be considerate of the area that you're going to. Are you going to a place where the enemies are going to be dealing, on average, enough damage that you're going to get value out of it or not? And I think if you're in hard mode, that might be the case, but a lot of what I do, it's honestly not good enough to bring, because it's just going to be healing for that 20 to 60 range that's just not good enough. So I don't typically tend to bring it very often at all because of that. So I'm actually going to give this a 2. Simply because while the effect on Reversal of Fortune can be really good, a lot of the time it isn't. And a lot of the time I think it gets overrated. So I just want to harp on this point for a moment. I think it's really important to just understand what is the standard issue case for skill, because something like this can sound like it does really well. And I think it probably performed superb in PvP because a lot of the time you're aiming for those higher hits, right? But in standard PvE, I don't think it does enough most of the time. So Really important to make sure you're not just listening to conventional wisdom and you're kind of thinking things through. And it took a long time for me to actually sit down and reevaluate how Reversal of Fortune was actually performing. So that brings us back to Life Sheath, which, like I said, is kind of an elite version of Reversal of Fortune. It removes 2 conditions and then has Reversal of Fortune's effect with a higher maximum. The higher maximum, again, doesn't typically matter, but it can in higher level areas. If you're being hit with high level Elementalist magic that's hitting for 100 plus damage, then this taking 84 out of that and converting it to healing will help quite a bit. So, I like this actually better than Reversal of Fortune because it's a condition removal spell, and the fact that it is multiple conditions that it can remove at least this rank of Healing Prayers is something that I actually find favorable, and I actually tend to bring it more as condition removal with Reversal of Fortune tacked on than I bring it as Reversal of Fortune with condition removal tacked on, if that makes any sense. So I'm going to give this a 3. I'm not the biggest fan of Life Sheath. I think it's fine. I would potentially like it more in an area with a lot of conditions, but again, I just tend to like my elite skills on my monk bars to be the pushers, the skills that push HP up, not skills that are meant to have some nice effect like this. So it's fine. It's just a lot of the time this is not what I want to be doing with my elite, and that's kind of its biggest flaw, I suppose. Mark of Protection. So Mark of Protection is 10 energy, 1 second cast time, 45 second recharge. It is an elite enchantment spell. For 10 seconds, whenever target ally would take damage, that ally is healed for that amount instead, maximum of 49. All your protection prayers are disabled for 5 seconds, for some reason. I don't know why this has the disable clause. It's not good to begin with. The issue is that 45 second recharge is monstrous. I prefer Healing Hands over this. I prefer Healing Seed over this. Those both have 25 second recharges in the last 10 seconds and heal a bunch. The Dolyak, what do they call them? I don't know. The dwarf healers on Dolyaks in the Southern Shiver Peaks use Mark of Protection, and it's very obnoxious when it goes on something because then it probably instantly gets healed back to full health. This is really, really, really powerful while it lasts. It's got an interesting icon too of this sort of almost hand-like thing. I just don't want this. Like, I don't want to bring this because the energy cost is kind of high, but it's kind of worth it. It's that 45 second recharge, and the fact that it's a 1 second cast time as well is a little weird, but that 45 second recharge is just so long, and the weird clause about disabling all of your protection prayers for 5 seconds is very peculiar. So this is one of those skills where it's like, yeah, this effect is amazing, but the recharge just kills it. So I would have liked seeing this be shorter duration and substantially shorter recharge time and not have the protection prayer disable clause. It's just a really weird clause. So I'm going to give this a 2. I don't think it's too powerful of an effect to be a 1. But man, it's going to be a rare day that I'm ever going to bring this with me. So that brings us to Mend Ailment. I touched on this one earlier when I talked about Dismiss Condition as I did Mend Condition. Mend Ailment is 5 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 5 second recharge. It is a spell. Remove 1 condition, and then it labels the conditions because this is a prophecy skill, so of course it does, from target ally. For each remaining condition, that ally is healed for 57 health. It's not bad. The problem is Dismiss Condition is going to outclass it most of the time. I also prefer Mend Condition over Mend Ailment, honestly. The ability to target myself isn't as good as the 2 second recharge compared to the 5. And healing for each remaining condition is a really interesting design space. But becomes less reliable if you're removing only 1 condition, which oftentimes you're not going to have a big stack of conditions on you. You're going to have probably 1, maybe 2, in which case, if you have only 2 conditions and you remove 1, Mend Ailment and Mend Condition are going to heal the same amount. So at that point, just take a shorter recharge. I have definitely used Mend Ailment more commonly in the past, long past, back more in the Prophecies or Prophecies Factions era, just because the ability to target yourself is relevant. But I feel like Dismiss Condition just outclasses both of these. So on that front, I'm going to give this guy a 2. Just because I'm not inclined to bring it. Mend Condition is nice. Again, I really like Monk's skill icons for some reason, and I don't quite know why. They just appeal to me for some reason. But anyway, Mend Condition is 5 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 2 second recharge, spell, remove 1 condition, lists them all out because prophecy skill descriptions, from target other ally. If a condition is removed, that ally is healed for 57 health. Again, I prefer Dismiss Condition just because it can function as a heal without having to remove a condition. This is technically more reliable of a heal because you're not always going to have an enchantment on the ally you're targeting with this Dismiss Condition, although you can kind of work around that to make sure that that's happening. If you're bringing, say, 3 Aegises across your party to be able to chain them to have Aegis up permanently, to have 100% uptime on that, then something like Dismiss Condition becomes even more reliable. But Mend Condition I like okay. I'm going to give it a 3. It's quite a perfectly fine condition removal. I'm just going to bring Dismiss Condition more often than it, just because Dismiss Condition I view as a little bit more reliable, and being able to target yourself is really nice, as I mentioned. So I think I kind of covered most of what I want to say about these, though, already. So let's go ahead and drop to Mending Touch. So Mending Touch is 5 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 6 second recharge, spell. Touched ally loses 2 conditions and is healed for 51 health for each condition removed in this way. So, I'm generally not going to use this on a monk primary because touch range is an enormous downside. I don't want to have to get up next to somebody to be able to heal them, especially physical attackers. That's just... clumping my party is part of the problem. The other problem is it takes so long because you're probably not next to them when you want to cast on them, so you have to run up next to them. And while the AI will automatically pathfind everything to it, that's fine. That's not the problem. The problem is that 3/4 second cast time starts looking pretty long when you have to take like a couple seconds to run up to them. So that's a huge downside. Now, this can target yourself, which is actually really nice. I can bring this on a warrior and be like, oh, hey, I've got a couple conditions on me. I'm going to Mending Touch to remove them. That's really cool. If I'm going into Monk for some other reason, there's some argument for bringing this. I would be very disinclined to bring it on heroes because they will try to use it on other characters and they will run around awkwardly to do that. So that becomes less appealing. And the thing is, if I'm not going into Monk for something, Ranger's Antidote Signet's superior. Has a shorter recharge, 4 seconds as opposed to 6, and only costs no energy instead of 5 energy. And it can remove up to 4 conditions if it's got all of the variety that it cares about. So, honestly, Mending Touch, it's fine-ish. I'm going to give it a 2. I think there are some circumstances where I might use it, but honestly, most of the time, this ain't what I want to do. Like, the effect is fine. It's just the touch range conditional clause is pretty severe. So, okay, Pacifism. Pacifism is 10 energy, 2 second cast time, 30 second recharge. Touched on it when I talked about Amity, but it is a hex spell with a lovely picture of a dove, because of course that's what it's a picture of. Hex spell for 18 seconds. Target foe cannot attack. This effect ends if the target takes damage. I do like this a bit better than Amity. It's not AoE, but it's range, which is very useful. But again, it ends when they take damage. From a design standpoint, I don't really like this. I don't like stuff that says, and now you cannot interact. I want to be able to interact. So, yeah, that to me is a problem. From a design standpoint, I just think that's uninteresting. It removes interaction and engagement, rather than something like empathy, which says you shouldn't attack, right? I prefer things that say you shouldn't rather than you can't. Just because I think it opens up more decision points rather than reducing them. And that, to me, is more compelling. In terms of like power, this is just, I'd rather use like blind or dazed or something to shut down, or no, I'd rather use blind to shut down the effectiveness of the attacks, because this doesn't stop spells. So something like blinding flash or blinding surge, which can keep like multiple foes, in fact, keep them blind. That doesn't end when they take damage, right? And yes, they have a 10% chance to hit, but most of the time they're missing. That, to me, is a much better form of countering attacking than pacifism is. So, bluntly, this to me is like, it's a 1. I don't want to bring it. I'd rather bring stuff that mitigates physical damage other ways. Particularly the blind condition. And I don't like the design of it either. So it's also kind of expensive and slow and long recharging, and it's just clunky. I think that if this was playing in a space that was more similar to where I wanted to modify Amity to, where it was like, for a few seconds, target foe cannot attack with a shorter cast time and recharge and lower energy cost, it starts to become more interesting. So if it's something where it's like 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 7-second recharge, for 5 seconds target foe cannot attack, that becomes a little bit more interesting to me. But the design of this skill is just not one that I'm interested in. Plus, the effect ending if the target takes damage is really hard to control in PvE with heroes or henchmen, usually heroes. So that becomes even more dubious as well. So yeah, especially because I like AoE stuff. So Pensive Guardian is a riff on Guardian, as you might expect by the name. It is longer lasting. It's 5 energy, 1 second cast time, and 5-second recharge. Enchantment spell. For 10 seconds, target ally has a 50% chance to block attacks from enchanted foes. So for comparison, let me just slap Guardian over here so we can look at it. Pensive Guardian is got 1 second longer recharge and lasts 4 seconds longer, but only affects foes that are enchanted. You have no control over... Okay, that's not true. You have some control over whether or not foes are enchanted, in so much as you can remove enchantments from them. You have no control over whether or not enchantments will be able to go on them. Well, okay, there's some stuff that you can use to block. But my point is, you cannot guarantee that there will be enchantments on the enemy party that could be placed on your enemies. This is an effect that too often is not going to do anything. You're going to spend 5 energy to place an enchantment on an ally that doesn't do anything. Because unless the foes are enchanted, it doesn't do anything. So I'm giving this a 1. I'm never going to use this. It's too inconsistent. If it was something where it's like, for 10 seconds, target ally blocks enchanted attacks from enchanted foes, like 100% chance, that becomes a lot more appealing. There might be areas where I might take that, and so it might get up to a 2. But again, that's unreliable. I'd prefer to remove enchantments from my enemies, usually because it's something beneficial. So, yeah, If this was like 50% chance to block attacks from hexed foes where I have control over it, it becomes a 2. There's some situations that could bump it up a bit, but as it is designed, it's just no. It's just so unreliable, and I have so little control over whether or not it will even do anything. And here's the thing. Guardian has a shorter recharge by 1 second, which matters a little bit, but it works. It doesn't work for as long, but it actually works. So, yeah, Pensive Guardian cannot compete effectively against Guardian at all. Protective Bond. So Protective Bond is a pip of energy regeneration, 10 energy to cast, and 2-second cast time. It is an enchantment spell. While you maintain this enchantment, target ally cannot lose more than 5% maximum health due to damage from a single attack or spell. When Protective Bond prevents damage, you lose 4 energy or the spell ends. So this is a variant on Protective Spirit, which blocks damage above 10% health. When it says 5%, it means 5% like of your maximum HP. So if I have, say, 490 HP as I currently do, 5% of that is going to be 0.05 times 490. Basically, let's see, 10% would be 49, so it's going to be about 25 HP. So I can't take more than 25 damage from a single source, from a single attack or a single spell. This is extraordinarily powerful at reducing damage, and becomes more so the more death penalty you have. So I have not really talked about death penalty a whole lot. The way it works is you can get up to 60% death penalty, which reduces your maximum health and energy by that amount. So each time you die, you get 15%. So you die once, you have 15% death penalty. It reduces your maximum HP and energy by 15%, so you're going to have a bit less. Then it's going to be 30 if you die again, and then 45, and then 60. There are morale boosts, which push in the opposite direction, so they increase your maximum health and maximum energy. Those are in 2% increments and cap at 10. So you can kind of think of the death penalty morale boost scale as going from negative 60 to positive 10, and it usually goes down in increments of 15 and up in increments of 2. Now, gaining experience points will also remove death penalty, so that will slowly wear that away, and there's some consumable items that get rid of it. But reducing the amount of damage you take, or capping it, I should say, based on your maximum health, is really good when you start dying a lot and get a lot of death penalty. So that's really nice. The thing is, Protective Bond's not the way I want to do it. Yes, it reduces more than Protective Spirit at 5% instead of 10. But it's also really, really, really expensive. Losing 4 energy each time it works is just so pricey, on top of maintaining it, and the initial buy-in of 10 energy. This is really expensive. I'm going to give this a 1. I'm sure that there are people who have tried to make this work, particularly for a 55 type of build. We'll talk about that when we get to Protective Spirit. But you'd have to do a lot to try to compensate for the energy costs that are involved with this. I don't know if you can get it down to like 2 energy. If you can, then you could use Balthazar's Aura and Essence Bond to be able to complement it. But yeah, I don't want to bring this skill. It's too friggin' expensive. And Protective Spirit exists, and that's the thing. So Protective Spirit, which has a very Buddhist-looking image to me, is 10 energy, quarter second cast time, 5-second recharge. It is an enchantment spell for 19 seconds. Target ally cannot lose more than 10% max health due to damage from a single attack or spell. So this is really good. I'm going to give this a 4. I do not tend to bring this in lower level areas just because it's very expensive. The effect is extremely strong, and in high level areas, it can reduce damage a lot. Like, oh, that 190 damage from the boss, yeah, that's being reduced. Or if you're getting killed a lot, like this is a really good counter to you're loaded down with death penalty, things like that. It also plays a really critical role in the 55 monk build, or the 55 build. It's the key part of it. So 55ing is a very specific thing, so I can demonstrate it a little bit if I put on all of this random old gear that I have. So all of this gear has superior runes in it. Superior of each type. And what you'll notice is right now I have 105 HP. So having 5 superior runes, each one removes 75 max health. And so I have dramatically decreased my maximum HP. And then I can go and equip, say, this Spirit of the Forgotten with this Grim Cesta. This is a weird Grim Cesta that you get in Priest-Searing Ascalon. That's the only place to get it. And it decreases your maximum health by 50 for some unknown reason. It's a blood magic. That's for that energy. You don't care. So if you look down here now, you'll see that I have 55 health. My health is 55 of 55. This is a very specific build. I have no idea how somebody discovered it. But this build makes you, obviously a very low health. When combined with Protective Spirit, you take only 5 damage from any source, basically. I think Lifesteal gets around this because it doesn't specifically call that out. And it generally wouldn't be good against it in a spike situation anyway, so it makes sense that they didn't. And lifesteal is a really good counter to this because you have so little HP. A lifesteal for 55 plus health is going to one-shot you. Most areas, that's not going to be a problem. So 55ing like this is or has traditionally been a very popular farming tactic because it means that you can survive any damage. You can just wander any high-level area, and any hits against you are just absorbed. This works really well with Healing Breeze because Healing Breeze will heal you for, 18 HP, 16, 18, 20 HP per second. That's going to really compensate for it. It also works really well with Shielding Hands, which you can stack it with. That reduces the damage you receive. You do have to stack them in order because they are processed in a specific order, and I'd have to experiment around with it to remember exactly how that works. I think you need Shielding Hands and Protective Spirit. But anyway, that completely negates the damage, so you can make yourself, for intents and purposes, absolutely invulnerable to all non-lifesteal damage. You are very vulnerable to life degeneration, and you're incredibly vulnerable to lifesteal, but otherwise, and being overloaded with damage too if you have too many enemies on you. This can work really well with Necromancer skills, particularly Spiteful Spirit. You throw that on one of the enemies, they're all grouped on you, they all kill themselves, things like that. So it can work really well in certain circumstances, but in general, this is a gimmicky sort of build, but I thought it was worth bringing up just because it's a cool piece of game history, and it's a cool thing empowered by this particular skill. I'm going to go ahead and get my normal equipment on now. Thank you very much. There we go. So yeah, that's a cool farming thing. I thought it was worth bringing up just because Protective Spirit enables that to work. Anyway, like I said, I don't typically bring this skill in lower level areas just because the effect of it is not needed. But in high level areas, it's really, really good. So I like what this is doing design-wise too and how it interplays. It's a good way to compensate for being loaded down with death penalty and stuff like that as well. So it does become harder to cast with high death penalty, obviously, because it reduces your maximum energy pool. But yeah. I like the design of this skill. My understanding is that it was an absolute nightmare and headache for the for ArenaNet's skill balancers, just because the effect is really strong and stuff like that. So anyway, let's go ahead and move on to Purifying Veil. So this is 1 pip of energy to maintain, 5 energy to cast, 1 second cast time, 6 second recharge. It is an enchantment spell. While you maintain this enchantment, conditions expire 41% faster on target ally. When this enchantment ends, 1 condition is removed from that ally. So this is actually based on a no attribute skill that's way the heck down here because it's no attributes, called Holy Veil, which affects hexes. The design is interesting. I've not really used it much. I feel like it's one of those skills that I read and I'm like, this is okay. I could see running this. So it's a very slow way to remove conditions. I'm not sure how good it is for the effect of making them expire faster. So to me, I'm going to give this a 2. It's a neat idea. But just making conditions expire faster feels a little bit weak when it's really easy to just straight up remove them. So I could see maybe using this in an area where there's a lot of shorter duration blinds getting thrown around a lot or something like that. But in those areas, I like bringing Sight Beyond Sight on my physical attackers anyway. So that Sight Beyond Sight is a ritualist spell. It's in spawning power, so you cannot get anywhere near 100% uptime with it. But while it's on, you are immune to blind. So yeah, Purifying Veil, interesting design, but I don't really have a reason to use it, if that makes sense. Rebirth. So Rebirth is actually an inspiration for Unyielding Aura's functionality, as well as the Sunspear Rebirth Signet. So let me go ahead and read it. Rebirth is 10 energy, except not really. It is a 5-second cast time, no recharge, sort of. It is a spell. Resurrect target party member. That party member is returned to life with 25% health and no energy, and is teleported to your current location. That seems pretty cool. I mean, they're pretty fragile, but all of that target skills are disabled for 4 seconds. So when you rebirth them, all of the skills are disabled for 4 seconds. That's the scaling part of this. Okay. This spell consumes all of your remaining energy. Well then. That's why I said it doesn't really cost 10 energy. You have to have a minimum of 10 energy to cast it, but it consumes all of it. And it doesn't technically have a recharge, but you have to wait to get back up to 10 energy. So I don't use this much anymore. This used to be a staple skill. And it was actually, you could use it because of the teleport. I don't know if it is still a true teleport, but at one point in time it was. So it could be used in Dunes of Despair. One person could use like Necrotic Traversal or Consume Corpse, which teleports you to a corpse. You kill a scarab on the border of the map, consume corpse to it. Then everybody else uses a vampiric weapon to kill themselves slowly after way too long. And then you pop a rebirth to get them over to you. It was a slow, clunky process, but it worked, technically. I don't tend to use this anymore. The big reason why this was popular was because if you were wiping, then a person with rebirth could get away from the battle and then and out of aggro range, and then they could resurrect you from outside aggro range if you were still like near where the group of enemies were. Like if all of your fallen allies were near the group of enemies, then you could slowly rebirth your party back and recover from big wipes and stuff like that. I'm going to be honest, that situation just doesn't really come up much anymore these days. I feel like I much more prefer being able to resurrect my party. Like, that was useful in missions, for example, or in the high-end PvE areas, Fissure of Woe, and I guess now the Tomb of the Primeval Kings and the Underworld. I didn't really do the Underworld much. Potentially like Urgos' Warren and those sorts of things. But basically high-end PvE areas where there's no resurrection shrines, so if you party wipe, you're kicked out. It's useful in those areas. It's useful in missions, again, where if everybody dies, you get kicked out. But in general, I prefer not to get into those sorts of situations. Most of the time, the resurrects that I'm going to be bringing are going to be other options. So, Resurrection Chant, because it restores them with full health and some energy, or and does not cost me all of my energy either, which is critical. Or I'm going to be bringing Flesh of My Flesh, because that's the Ritualist Resurrect. That doesn't suck. Or I'm going to be bringing one of the Paragon options of We Shall Return, which resurrects everyone. 25 energy, but 0 cast time, resurrecting your entire party in earshot range, I should say. Resurrecting your entire... but basically, it's resurrecting your entire party with no cast time is really strong. Or it's going to be the Signet that they have as a free way of resurrecting. That's not one that I typically will bring, though, just because it resurrects with very minimal stats, at least initially. But anyway, so Rebirth has a great history to it, and I'm going to give it a 2 as a nod to that history, but honestly, I'm never actually bringing this these days, but I do kind of want to honor it a little bit from that. Okay. So that was a lot of talking, a lot of game history there. So that brings us to Restore Condition. This is 5 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 2 second recharge. It is an elite spell. Remove all conditions. Then it lists all of the conditions, because prophecies, descriptions, from target other ally. For each condition removed, that ally is healed for 58 health. So, to me, this is a solid 2. If I'm going into an area where there is just an absolute ton of conditions floating around, this is a really good counter. This removes all the conditions from target other ally. Just cleans them off. That's really good. The problem here is that it takes up your elite slot. So unless you are having to clean off a lot of conditions from your party, I'd rather bring something else for my elite, and I'm happy with like Dismiss Condition. It has another problem too, and the other problem, let's see if I have it here, is Mend, Body, and Soul. So, with proper speccing into Restoration Magic, Mend, Body, and Soul heals for like 80, 90 health. It is a 3 second cast time, but otherwise its stats are the same. And it heals the ally and guaranteed, and then they lose a condition for each spirit with an earshot. I'm usually bringing a Signet of Spirits build that has 4 spirits on it. This is going to heal for 4 conditions, and it does not take up my elite slot. So, bluntly, the biggest problem with Restore Condition is that there's a non-elite skill that is just generally useful that basically does the same thing. Removing all conditions and removing 4 conditions are extremely similar. They're not identical, and Mend Body and Soul is not guaranteed to do that, obviously. But in practical terms, most of the time, it is able to remove 3-4 conditions and guarantee heal and not take up my elite slot. So, unfortunately, Restore Condition it's a very powerful answer to something, but there's some other options that, while not quite as directly powerful at doing that thing in the extreme case, in the average case is just as good and does not take up my elite slot. And that's the real problem here. I'm not going to spend my elite on this. That's what it comes down to. It does really require a very specific set of circumstances for me to want to bring this skill. It's also a pain in the butt to capture, if I remember correctly, but that's neither here nor there. We talked about Reversal of Fortune at length, and apparently the game heard me saying it's not that great, or it often is not as good as people thought it was, and decided I should lose my connection. So let's just move right on to Reverse Hex. So Reverse Hex is 10 energy, quarter-second cast time, 10-second recharge. It is an enchantment spell. Remove 1 hex from target ally. If a hex was removed in this way for 9 seconds, the next time target ally would take damage, that damage is reduced by 41. So this is kind of like, oh, we're undoing the hex by reducing damage. It's 10 energy, though. So hex removal at quarter-second cast time with a 10-second recharge is nice. A lot of the removal takes 1 second to cast and has 12-second recharge. Not remove hex, but we'll get to that much later. But 10 energy is a lot. And it does come stapled with some damage reduction. But here's the problem. If we go back up to Healing Prayers, there's a spell called Cure Hex. I don't know if you remember it or not, but Cure Hex was only 5 energy. Yes, it has a 12-second recharge and a 1-second cast time. Reverse Hex is better on that. But this, if it removes a hex, heals for 102 health. I don't know about you, but it seems to me that healing for 102 health is doing more benefit for my health bar than preventing the next 41 damage that would be dealt. Or the next hit. Was it even that? No, it's the next time they take damage is reduced by 41. This is the same problem as Reversal of Fortune, right? A lot of the time, you're not going to get maximum out of this. I don't like this very much. I'm real close to giving this a 1. I'm going to give this a 2. I'm going to give this a 2 because technically it does remove a hex with some nice partial stats, and it does technically do a thing, but this is really underwhelming to me. This is not the hex removal that I want. It's just too expensive, and I'm not getting enough for the price. So, yeah. If it was something where it's if a hex was removed in this way for 9 seconds, the ally is taking reduced... Basically, if this was a Shielding Hands that required hex removal, Shielding Hands reduces damage that would be taken by a bit for a certain duration. If this was kind of playing in that territory, I would be more interested in it, but even then, it's... Yeah. I don't know. That 10 energy is just a lot, and I really need to be getting a lot out of it. And while technically damage reduction, like Shielding Hands, staple to hex removal, adds up to 10 energy, that still is a lot of energy at once, and I kind of feel like that's a bit more than I want to be spending, if that makes sense. Shield Guardian. So this is really weird because it has a 1.5 second cast time. It's 5 energy, 1.5 second cast time, 20-second recharge. It's an enchantment spell. For 3 seconds, all party members in earshot have a 75% chance to block attacks. If an attack is blocked, all allies in earshot are healed for 34 health and Shield Guardian ends. My understanding of this is that it ends on all allies when that happens. but I am suddenly realizing that I'm not at all certain of that. So that's something that maybe I should test? Either way, I'm giving this a 3. It doesn't specifically matter how it works. The duration is very short. The recharge is very long. The effect is nice. It does provide a little bit of like party support and healing. It's an interesting idea. I don't like the cast time, and I really don't like the recharge. So I don't use this often. I've tried it a few times, but I'm just not a big fan of it. So it feels okay to me. Okay, Shield of Absorption. This is 5 energy, 1 second cast time, 10-second recharge, enchantment spell. For 6 seconds, damage received by target ally is reduced by 5 each time that ally is hit while under the effects of this enchantment. So if that doesn't make any sense to you, basically the first time you hit, it's going to reduce damage by 5, I think, or maybe 0 and then 5, 10, 15, 25. So like each hit you take reduces the damage you take progressively more and more. This is really good for somebody who's getting dogpiled by a bunch of things. You slap this on them. Now, the 1 second cast time is a pretty big downside. But you put this on an ally, and if they're getting wailed on, they pretty quickly are reducing damage by hundreds. Enough to completely erase all damage that they're taking for that duration. Now, it is a bit short duration. It gets bumped up by like a second by enchanting mod, which is nice, but this is a 5 for me. I'm basically always bringing this because the effect is very good. Again, if somebody is under heavy fire, this quickly makes them practically invulnerable to damage. So I am quite fond of it. It does not have the lifesteal clause, interestingly enough, I note. So anyway, a very good way of dealing with heavy pressure. Shield of Deflection. Shield of Deflection is 10 energy, quarter second cast time, 10-second recharge, elite enchantment spell. For 9 seconds, target ally has a 75% chance to block attacks and gains 27 armor. So 27 armor is a nice additional boost that's mostly useful against elemental damage. So like elementalist spells and stuff like that, and the attacks that slip through the 75% block chance. This is basically an elite version of Guardian. I like this okay. I don't tend to run it on Primary Monk. I tend to run this on like a Paragon more often. The effect is really strong. The recharge is a little bit long. The biggest problem this has is this is about a 7 energy skill. It's not a 10 energy skill. 10 energy is just too much for this effect. But caveats here. It's 5 energy is too little, I think, for this skill. So it might be okay because it's an elite. I don't know. This is one where I'd really want to try playing with the numbers a little bit. Maybe drop the duration to like 6 or 7 seconds. Drop the recharge to more like 5 and drop the energy cost to 5 and see how it feels. It creates a really nice defensive bubble. And I like the animation for it that presents that bubble. But I don't know. I'm just not... I like this skill a little bit more than I think it's good. I'm going to give it a 3. That's maybe a little generous, honestly. It's just not worth 10 energy. The biggest problem with this skill is it's not worth 10 energy. I think it's a little bit hard with their very stringent energy cost pricing things to actually cost this appropriately. So, I don't know. I don't know if this is a source skill you want to be good enough or not anyway, because it might be unfun if it is good enough. It's just hard to say. But yeah, I like this skill more than it's worth. So let's go ahead and move on to Shield of Regeneration. So this is 15 energy, very expensive. Quarter second cast time, 8-second recharge. Randomly enough, this is actually more of an elite healing breeze in protection prayers for some random reason. It is an elite enchantment spell. For 11 seconds, target ally gains +9 health regeneration and 40 armor. So 40 armor halves the damage that they're taking from armor respecting sources. So if it ignores armor, it does absolutely nothing, but physical, like regular attacking, auto attacking, and like elementalist spells. There's a lot of stuff that deals damage that armor cares about. So this does make somebody way more durable. The huge amount of health regen on it's really nice. This to me is another like 3, only because I kind of like it. Again, probably more than it's worth. Again, this is another skill that I tend to slap on a Paragon more often than on a Monk primary, just because the energy cost is way more absorbable by a Paragon than it is by or a Necromancer for that matter, than it is a Monk. Just 15 energy is huge cost for a Monk. It's also really weird to me that this skill, I guess the 40 armor is what puts it in Protection Prayers. This, to me, could go in either Healing Prayers or Protection Prayers, so it's just kind of a toss-up. I enjoy the effect. It does make somebody feel like, oh, now you're really durable, but it is very expensive and a little underwhelming for the amount of cost you're putting into it. This would probably honestly be okay at 10 energy. I think 10 energy would be an appropriate place for it. I don't know why these two skills just feel a little bit weak to me for their energy costs, but I still like them regardless. So I don't know. Here we are, random my biases in favor of weak skills. Shielding Hands. Shielding Hands is 5 energy, quarter second cast time, 15 second recharge. Enchantment spell for 8 seconds. Damage and lifesteal received by target ally is reduced by 15. When Shielding Hands ends, that ally is healed for 41 health for some random reason. The health heal is a nice side effect, I guess. I bring this one a lot. This is another 5. It's a nice complement to Shield of Absorption. But Shielding Hands, which is just like a couple of hands rasped together, is, except they're very blue, a really effective way of reducing damage, especially in the lower level PvEs. So where Reversal of Fortune is bad, Shielding Hands is strong, because a lot of those hits that are, that like 12 to 24 damage range, which a lot of the auto attacking and other things in lower level areas are going to be in those ranges, and a lot of normal mode PvE, this is going to reduce a lot of damage, so this really does a really good job of defending someone. So I'm quite fond of this. I like the design space that it's in. I do kind of wish it was like more of a 12-second recharge instead of 15, but it's fine where it is. So this to me is kind of like, this and Guardian are what Protection Prayers are at sort of their purest essence. Maybe Protective Spirit. Like, some of those skills are to me kind of like the essence of what Protection Prayers is about. But that, and I guess like Mend Condition, because it's condition removal. But anyway, this is really solid damage mitigation. I really like this sort of solid effect like this. So Spirit Bond. Spirit Bond. Oh, Spirit Bond. So Spirit Bond is 10 energy, quarter second cast time, 2 second recharge. Enchantment spell. For 8 seconds, whenever target ally takes more than 50 damage from the next 10 attacks or spells, that ally is healed for 78 health. So this has this weird clause from the next 10 attacks or spells. This counting thing was also added to Watch Yourselves. It's here as an anti-farming clause. Because what happened is, you could have... So, you would take a Mesmer, and there are other situations where you could do this, but you could take a Mesmer and give them, like, armor from really low level areas, from Ascalon City, or like your starter armor that you start off the game with, that has like terrible numbers, like 4 armor, right? And when you have that, you're taking like 2 point some odd times damage from everything that cares about armor. So you'd just be taking massive damage. And so you'd slap on Spirit Bond and Protective Spirit, all of a sudden you're taking 60 damage. That's exactly the amount of damage you're taking. And so Spirit Bond's triggering off of every single hit. And so you are literally, every time you take damage, you're taking 60 damage and being healed for 78, so you're invulnerable. That's how that worked. The setup was really cool, but it was also, I guess, too effective for ArenaNet's taste. Like, this is one of the things that's really awkward. A single-player game, farming is okay. Like, honestly, I think... So in a single-player game, I think you want to have farm detection code that detects when the player is farming and make life easier for them. That improves their drops and things like that. Whereas in an MMO or an online game, basically in a game that has an online economy, like this game does, like Guild Wars 2 does, like MMOs in general have. This is not quite a true MMO in the sense of like a persistent open world game, but it is an online game. In those sort of circumstances, farming tends to be bad because it floods the economy and it inflates everything. So it's this really weird where you want to make it so farming is harder, so that way like bots and stuff can't do it as efficiently and things like that. But unfortunately, it means that they have to kill certain really cool farms. Rest in peace, Griffin farming in the Crystal Desert. I still remember you. But anyway, Spirit Bond is actually still a really good skill. It is sort of a counterpart to Protective Spirit, in that both of them don't do anything unless you're taking really big hits. Protective Spirit reduces damage down. This kind of heals damage. It does fall into a similar place as Reversal of Fortune, where I'm not going to bring Spirit Bond unless it's a high-level area where I'm more likely to be getting hit for those big hits. It also has a really low recharge, which means the AI isn't prone to spam this at the slightest provocation, like the slightest hint that you're taking damage, boom, Spirit Bond is on you. So it's going to chew through AI energy really badly as well, which is a huge risk. I'm going to give this guy a 2. I don't tend to bring this very often. And I think Protective Spirit is a bit better than it because Protective Spirit is useful if you're getting a lot of death penalty at reducing damage even further. So if you're getting high death penalty and you have 200 HP, 200x HP, then Protective Spirit will reduce damage to 20. This requires damage to be more than 50 to do anything. So I like this in high-level areas and things like that, but I don't like this for general PvE usage just because it's just not going to trigger very often. But it's really important to remember that the skill exists, especially for higher-level areas, where it does a lot to be like, somebody's getting smacked upside the head for lots of damage, slap this on them, now they're not dying. It's really great for that. But yeah, otherwise, in just standard normal mode PvE, I don't usually bring this just because the AI spams it too much and it does too little, because it too often damage is not crossing the threshold. But I like the design space. I like it where it sits, and it creates a nice sort of like release valve from like, oh, you're going into an area where getting hit really hard. Okay, bring this along, and suddenly you can prevent your team from dying. So from that standpoint, I really do like its design. Okay, Vital Blessing. Vital Blessing. Okay, so Vital Blessing is 1 pip of energy to maintain, energy regeneration to maintain, 10 energy to... I don't know why this game has regular graphics hits. Sorry, it's something that's been happening in the background where it like seems to like skip a frame or something, and it looks really weird. Hopefully, I have not ruined things for you. But I don't know why that happens. Anyway, you know what? I bet that's on a sync pulse or something where it's syncing with the server for positional information or something. Sorry, this is completely off topic. Okay, so Vital Blessing, 10 energy to 3/4 second cast time, 2-second recharge. Enchantment spell. While you maintain this enchantment, target ally has plus 168 maximum health. I don't like this skill. I don't know why you would ever use this skill. Yes, it makes somebody bulkier, but why? But why though? So that's just HP that you have to heal. I would rather bring skills that reduce the damage they take, or, can heal the damage they've taken, rather than skills that just give them more health. So I'm not a big fan of this one. I'm going to give this one a 1. I understand why the skill exists. It's super low-hanging fruit. It's a super, low-hanging idea. It's a really obvious, straightforward, simple idea to implement of like, oh, we've come up with this idea of maintain enchantments. Hey, how about one that increases an ally's maximum HP? So cool. Slap it in the game. Very obvious, easy to design sort of first sort of skill. I just don't think it's a very exciting skill or a very good skill. I do worry that this is the sort of skill that a new player looks at and thinks is amazing when it's not. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this. If it was 5 energy and quarter second cast time, I might actually like it okay as an emergency heal, because I'm pretty sure that 168 maximum health is going to be like raw health, so it can kind of pseudo pretend to be 168 point heal. And in that case, it becomes more interesting. I'm not quite sure why this is in protection prayers over healing prayers from that standpoint. So if it was like 5 energy core second cast time, then that becomes more interesting because it gives you buffer. Then you can heal them up and then drop this. That would create more interesting play. At 10 energy, it's just too expensive, and 3/4 second cast time doesn't quite play into that either. But at 10 energy, it's just too expensive to do that. So I don't know. Maybe it could play in that space okay, but I just feel like 10 energy is way too much. I'd rather bring heal other at that point because it actually heals, and I don't want to bring heal other because it's too expensive. So yeah, that's kind of my place on this one. I think it makes a lot of sense to design those sorts of skills that are like obvious low-hanging fruit type skills. I just think it's really useful to think about when would this actually be useful to use, why should somebody use this, and try to tweak it to actually fit that. So that brings us finally to the end of protection prayers with Zealous Benediction, which is 10 energy, 3/4 second cast time, 4 second recharge, elite spell, heal target ally for 150 health. So it's kind of like an elite heal other, right? If that ally was below 50% health when you cast this, not after the heal, then you gain 7 energy. So this can have a refund. Keep in mind that it does have the initial buy-in of 10. To me, this is unfortunately a bit weak. I like it mildly better than Word of Healing, but again, when you're playing with AI tends to be very aggressive about topping off health bars. It keeps allies high. This, basically, I don't want to bring my elite skill as heal other, because heal other is too expensive, and just bringing my elite skill as that is not really appealing. Most of the time, I'm going to want to bring Blessed Light over this, because Blessed Light, for those who do not remember, let me pop off out of these healing prayers and put on Divine Favor so I can remind you. Get out of here, Restoration Magic. So, Blessed Light is healing for notably less, but it removes a condition and a hex. I'm generally going to want that over Zealous Benediction. I think the skill is pretty solid in PvP. It is nice to be able to bring this and not have to spec into healing prayers to get healing, and this does heal for quite a lot. And I kind of like, actually, the place that it fits in from a protection prayers standpoint. Like, a healing skill in protection prayers is a little wonky, just like Shield of Regeneration is. It's not quite the attribute line that's supposed to do that. Just kind of like Spotless Mind and Spotless Soul kind of feel wonky in healing prayers, where it's not quite what this attribute line does. So I like the way that it's kind of like a little clunky. It is a really strong heal, but unfortunately, the clause to make it an affordable heal is actually really finicky to do with heroes a lot of the time, just because their AI is programmed to keep HP bars up, and Zealous Benediction just becomes heal other in protection prayers as an elite in that case, and that's not what I want to spend my elite slot on. So I'm going to give this a 2, in part to a nod to its potential strength and its usefulness in PvP, but I just don't really want this in PvE most of the time, because, again, I'm playing with heroes and henchmen. Well, I'm just playing with heroes, no henchmen. And in those circumstances, Zealous Benediction often is just going to be heal other, and I don't want heal other. So, anyway, that's been my thoughts on protection prayers. I do think something like Zealous Benediction is a pretty reasonable design. I think it's great for like PvP. I think it'd be great in like a tactics game where you're in control of everything and can actually make sure that it's getting its effects off, or some other RPG. But the way Guild Wars works, yeah, I don't want it most of the time. Anyway, I have rambled, so this has been my look at protection prayers. The next time we'll talk about smiting prayers. And until then, everyone, take care and goodbye.